My name is Evelyn Hart, and I am 66 years old. For most of my life, I have lived in quiet harmony with the land my parents left behind, a modest 33 acres just outside Willow Bend. I tended it the way my father once did, slowly, deliberately, and with a kind of reverence that only comes from understanding how long it takes for something to grow. Most mornings I walked the southern ridge with my coffee in hand, listening to the wind move through the pines. It was the kind of stillness you don't realize you cherish until someone tries to take it from you. My aunt, my mother's only sister, was named Margot. She was 10 years younger than my mother, sharp-tongued, and always convinced she had been cheated out of something. As a child, I learned to see her coming from a mile away, stiff posture, pinched mouth, the quiet expectation that the world owed her a little more than she'd gotten. For years, she kept her distance. A phone call on Christmas. A birthday card with her name scribbled at the bottom. No real relationship, no real warmth. I didn't mind. Some people are easier to love from afar. But everything changed after my mother's passing 3 years ago. I thought grief might soften Margot. Instead, it sharpened her edges like a whetstone. At first it was small things, questions about what exactly was in my mother's will, reminders that family assets should stay within the bloodline, subtle remarks about how she hoped everything had been divided fairly. Fairly. That word always carried a quiet warning when it came from her. I told myself to let it go. After all, I had spent decades caring for this land. My mother had been clear in her wishes. There had been no ambiguity, no room for reinterpretation. I was the sole inheritor. But Margot had a talent for creating storms where there had once been peace. The first real sign of trouble came on a gray October morning. I found her car parked crookedly in my driveway, her silhouette rigid behind the steering wheel. She hadn't even waited for me to open the door before stepping out with the look of someone who had already decided on a fight. "Evelyn," she said, folding her arms, "we need to talk about the property." Her voice carried that cool authority that made people bristle without knowing why. I remember standing on the porch, rain jacket still unzipped, thinking, here it is. The thing she's been circling around all this time. "I've been doing some calculations," she announced. "Given your age and lifestyle, it doesn't make much sense for you to hold on to all this land alone." Her eyes swept across the fields as if she were already dividing them in her head. I kept my voice gentle. "It's not up for discussion, Margot." She smiled, but not kindly. That was the moment I first sensed just how far she might go. And I had no idea yet that she would soon take it much further, far beyond anything I expected, in ways that would force me to respond with a quiet, steady kind of justice she never saw coming. Because while she was certain the land wasn't mine to keep, she had no idea that the title, every acre of it, had already been legally cemented, filed, and protected long before she planned her attack. But that revelation, that would come later. For now, the storm was only beginning its slow rumble over the horizon. And the next time she showed up, she wouldn't be knocking. She'd be demanding. Margot returned 2 weeks later with a different approach. I should have known the calm was temporary, the kind of silence a predator uses before pouncing. This time she didn't bother posturing. She walked into my kitchen, uninvited, set her handbag on the table, and spoke with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed every word. "I've spoken with an attorney," she said. "And he agrees it's improper that you hold the land alone." My spoon paused halfway to my mouth. "Improper?" I repeated. "Yes," she said, voice dripping with righteousness. "Your mother never had the right to exclude her only sister. Especially considering the family history." I set my oatmeal down. The will was legally binding. "You know that." Margot gave a thin smile. "Lawyers make mistakes. And so do grieving daughters who rush paperwork." There it was, the accusation. Beneath the words was a deeper one: "You don't deserve what you have." "I've filed a petition," she continued, "to contest the inheritance. And to have the land reevaluated for redistribution." My chest tightened. "You did what?" She waved dismissively. Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's standard. If you've done everything properly, you have nothing to worry about. Then she leaned closer, her perfume too sharp, her voice low and venomous. But Evelyn, we both know you shouldn't be managing property of this size at your age. It would be much more appropriate for me to take over. I stared at her, stunned. Margot had never worked the land a day in her life. She didn't know the difference between winter rye and spring oats. She didn't understand irrigation cycles. She didn't even like dirt. But she liked ownership. She liked control. You're not getting the land, I told her. Her smile didn't falter. We'll let the court decide. She gathered her purse, turned sharply, and paused at the doorway. Oh, she added casually, I'll need access to the property lines for the appraisers next week. Try not to make this difficult. When she left, the silence in the house felt heavier than it had during my mother's funeral. For the first time, I felt the sting of betrayal deep in my bones. Margot had not just challenged my inheritance, she had accused me, accused my mother, of dishonesty. But beneath the shock, something steadier began forming. A resolve. My mother had prepared me for many things, including the possibility that Margot would one day come clawing for land that was never hers to claim. What Margot didn't know was that the property title had been filed years earlier under a legal structure she couldn't touch, filed with precision, clarity, and protections designed specifically for situations like this. But I wasn't ready to reveal that yet. Not until I understood why she wanted the land so desperately. And that answer came only days later, in the form of a whispered warning that changed everything. Someone close to her reached out, and what they told me opened a door I hadn't expected, a door leading straight into the heart of her motives. The call came on a Wednesday evening. I was pruning the rosemary bush when my neighbor, Clara, phoned with a tone that instantly made my stomach tighten. Evelyn, she whispered, I think you should know something about your aunt. I leaned against the porch railing. What is it? Clara exhaled shakily. I overheard Margot at the post office. She wasn't alone, she was speaking with a developer. My hand froze. A developer? I asked. Yes. She was telling him she'd soon have control of your land, and that she could guarantee a sale once the legal annoyance, meaning you, was handled. My heart dropped. Clara continued, he mentioned residential parcels. Big money. Margot said she was counting on it. For a moment everything around me blurred, the orchard, the path, the fading sunlight. My land. The one my father tilled through summers so hot the soil cracked in his hands. The one my mother walked every morning until her legs gave out. Margot wanted to carve it up and sell it to the highest bidder. The betrayal deepened. Not just greed. Not just entitlement. But the willingness to destroy the one remaining piece of my parents' legacy. After I thanked Clara and hung up, I sat at the table with an old wooden box before me, my mother's papers. I had already known about the property trust. I had already known the land's legal shelter was impenetrable. But now I understood why Margot was fighting so viciously. The family history was complicated, yes. My grandfather had left little behind, and what little there was had created decades of tension. But my mother had always been generous to her sister, even when Margot pushed boundaries. She paid off medical bills. She helped with rent. She sent money during the years when Margot couldn't keep a job. Yet somehow, in Margot's mind, that generosity had crystallized into debt, one she believed we owed her. I opened the file labeled Property Trust, 2009. Inside were the documents my mother and I signed when she first fell ill. She had insisted, even then, that the land remain whole. She had told me that one day someone might try to dismantle it. I had laughed back then. I'm not laughing now, I remember saying. But she was right. And she had prepared me. Earlier that year, when she sensed her health declining, she executed the transfer, securing the land in a private, irrevocable trust with me as its sole trustee. Then she filed the title early, long before her death, sealing its legal standing in a way no one could challenge. Margot never knew. She still didn't know. But before I revealed that truth, I wanted to understand every angle of her plan. Every lie. Every manipulation. So I went looking. I started with her attorney. Then I dug deeper. And what I uncovered next, her financial situation, her history with the developer, the quiet desperation she'd been hiding, would turn this conflict from a simple inheritance dispute into something far more calculated. The truth was surfacing. And once it did, Margot's entire house of cards would collapse. But first, I needed evidence, real, undeniable evidence. And I was about to get it. The next morning I drove into Willow Bend dressed in plain clothes, hair pulled into a low bun. I didn't want to stand out. I didn't want whispers trailing behind me. I just needed answers. My first stop was the courthouse records office. Not to check my own documents, I already knew those were airtight, but to look into the petition Margot had filed. The clerk, a young man with sandy hair, pulled the folder after I gave my name. As he placed it in front of me, he hesitated. "Are you okay reading this alone?" he asked gently. I didn't understand until I opened it. Inside were statements Margot had sworn under penalty of perjury, false claims that I had manipulated my mother, that I had hidden assets, that I was mentally unfit to manage property, that I had taken advantage of my mother's grief. Every sentence sliced deeper. But her biggest mistake was assuming I would crumble under lies. I photographed everything. Next, I visited a friend who worked at the planning office. Over tea in her break room, she quietly pulled up development proposals submitted in the area. There it was. Green Star Developments. Proposed subdivision. Preliminary sketches. 33 acres. My jaw tightened. "That's my land," I whispered. She nodded. The developer submitted this under the assumption he'd soon acquire it through a private seller. "Margot," I breathed. My friend looked uneasy. "Evelyn, developers don't draw up plans unless someone promised them something." I thanked her and left with copies. By afternoon I was driving across town to a small cafe where I suspected I'd find the final missing piece. Margot's financial counselor, who also happened to be a distant cousin, worked from a laptop there most afternoons. I bought him coffee. I didn't ask for confidential information, I simply told him what Margot was trying to do. He sighed heavily. "Evelyn," he said, "she's drowning in debt. High-interest loans. A second mortgage. She's desperate." That explained everything. Greed had a source. Desperation had a shape. He paused before adding, "She told the developer she'd clear her debts once the land sold. She's counting on this. She needs it. But need does not create entitlement. And desperation does not justify betrayal." I thanked him, then drove home as the sun dipped low behind the ridge. On my counter I laid out the evidence, her false statements. Her secret development plans. Her financial motives. Her coordination with a developer. Piece by piece, the truth formed a picture too clear to ignore. Margot wasn't fighting for heritage. She wasn't honoring family history. She was trying to sell our legacy out of panic and greed. But she still didn't know the title had been filed years before she even contemplated this scheme, filed in a way that made her entire plan legally impossible. Now it was time to let discovery do its work. Because the next step was simple, bring everything to light. And the place to start was the meeting Margot demanded for the appraisers. She thought she'd be introducing them to her future property. She had no idea what she was walking into. The day of the appraiser meeting, the sky hung low and gray, the kind of weather that makes everything feel a little sharper. Margot arrived in a crisp navy coat, heels sinking slightly in the soil. Behind her were two men with clipboards and rolled maps. "Let's begin," she said briskly. I folded my hands calmly. "Before we walk anywhere, I think you should see something." She sighed dramatically. "Evelyn, please. We don't have time for whatever emotional display you're planning." I held her gaze. This is legal, not emotional. Her chin lifted, challenging. I opened the folder in my hands and laid the documents neatly across the outdoor table, the trust paperwork, the early title filing, the notarized confirmations, and the property protections my mother put in place. This, I said softly, is the land's legal status. She stared, expression blank at first, then slowly draining of color. What is this? She whispered. This, I repeated, is the trust your sister created in 2009. The trust that transferred the property to me long before she passed. The title was filed that same year. Irrevocably. Completely. Margot looked like the earth had tilted beneath her. That's impossible, she snapped. I would have been told. I should have been told. You weren't entitled to be told, I said quietly. She snatched up one document and scanned it, eyes darting. This can't be valid. The lead appraiser stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. Ma'am, this is absolutely valid. This land isn't legally transferable, contestable, or divisible. It's locked. The second appraiser nodded. We can't assess land that's already secured under an irrevocable trust. Someone misinformed you. Margot's breath turned shallow. No, she whispered. No, he told me, he said. Her voice cracked. In that moment, I saw the truth settle over her like a heavy, suffocating blanket. She had made promises she couldn't keep. She had built an elaborate scheme on land she never had a legal claim to. And now the facade was crumbling. I slid the final set of papers across the table, printed copies of her false statements, her development plans, and her communications with the developer that I had gathered. I know why you wanted the land, I said softly. I know about the debt. I know about the deal you made. And I know every lie you signed your name to. Her eyes glistened with something sharp, anger, humiliation, fear. How dare you, she hissed. You're using this to destroy me. No, I said. You destroyed your own case the moment you chose deception over conversation. The appraisers exchanged looks. Margot trembled. Evelyn, please, you can't show this to the court. I can, I said. And I will. Her breath hitched. But I wasn't finished. However, I continued gently, you still have a chance to correct your petition and withdraw your claims before the court sees what you filed. Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Why would you give me that chance? Because this isn't about vengeance, I said. It's about truth. Her jaw clenched, her pride wrestling with her fear. And I knew deep in my bones, that she was finally realizing the magnitude of what she had done. But the real confrontation, that was still ahead. Because Margot wasn't ready to back down. Not yet. And when she tried to salvage her scheme, I would be waiting, with the full truth in hand. The confrontation came 2 days later, inside the courthouse conference room where a mediator had scheduled a meeting. The room smelled faintly of old paper and lemon polish. A long wooden table stretched between us. Margot arrived stiffly, clutching a folder like a weapon. Her attorney, a younger man with too much confidence, sat beside her. I sat across from them, my own folder resting loosely at my fingertips. Calm. Solid. Grounded. The mediator, a gray-haired woman with a gentle voice, began by reviewing the purpose of the meeting. But Margot cut her off. I intend to prove that the property was transferred improperly, she said. And that Evelyn manipulated. I opened my folder and slid 3 sets of documents forward, the trust, the early title filing, and the notarized confirmations. This is the land's legal status, I said steadily. Filed in 2009. The year my mother learned she was ill. Her attorney picked up the documents, scanned them, and his expression shifted. Confusion first, then discomfort, then something like dread. He whispered something to Margot. She stiffened. That can't override the will, she muttered. It predates the will, he said quietly. The mediator cleared her throat gently. Ms. Hart's aunt, this is extremely clear. The trust is irrevocable. There is no legal route to contest it. Margot's voice rose. There must be. You don't understand. I was promised. Her attorney touched her arm, warning. But she jerked away. No. She tricked my sister. She must have. I held her gaze. You know that's not true. She glared at me with a fury that came from deeper wounds, wounds she had never admitted existed. You stole my birthright, she spat. I was the one who cared for the land, I said softly. I was the one who stayed with your sister through her illness. I was the one who followed her wishes. That's your story, she snapped. I slid the second stack of evidence forward, the development plans, the debt records I had permission to disclose, and the meeting notes. Margot, I said gently but firmly, this is your story. The mediator leaned forward. Ms. Crane, is it true you attempted to sell the land to a developer before securing any legal claim? Margot's hands shook. I had to, she whispered. I needed to. You don't understand what it's been like. Her attorney pinched his eyes shut. The mediator sighed. Ms. Crane, your petition contains several statements that are provably false. You risk perjury charges if you continue down this path. Margot's breathing quickened. So what happens now? That depends on you, I said. She turned to me, eyes wild. If you withdraw your petition, I continued, I will not file a counterclaim. I will not pursue damages. And I will not report your false statements to the district attorney. Silence fell. Margot swallowed hard. Her pride was cracking. But still, she hesitated. You expect me to walk away with nothing? She whispered. I held her gaze. You walk away without consequences. That's more than you came here with. Her attorney cleared his throat. Margot, you should withdraw. She crumpled then, not dramatically, not loudly. Just a slow collapse of shoulders, a quiet unraveling of defiance. Finally she whispered, fine. The mediator nodded. I'll have the paperwork drafted. Margot didn't look at me again. But as she stood to leave, she paused, just a fraction of a second, and I knew she understood exactly what had happened. This wasn't revenge. This was reality catching up to her. And yet, the consequences were only beginning. Not from me, never from me. But from the truth she tried so hard to avoid. In the days that followed, Margot's life began to shift in ways she had long feared. Quietly, steadily, and entirely of her own making. First came the withdrawal of the petition. It was processed quickly, the court closing the matter with a final note that the dispute had no merit. Then came the developer, who, upon learning he'd been misled, sent her a formal notice terminating any informal agreements. He also hinted at the possibility of civil action for wasted planning expenses. Her financial counselor later told me she'd broken down in his office, overwhelmed by the mounting debts she once hoped to cover with the land sale. Word of the failed claim spread through the family. Some relatives were sympathetic, others were tired of her long history of manipulation. Old wounds reopened. Old grievances resurfaced. For the first time in her life, Margot was forced to face the consequences of her choices without someone stepping in to rescue her. I kept my distance. I tended my land. I walked the property at sunrise and thought often about the strange way justice sometimes works, not as a loud triumph, but as a quiet settling of balance. One afternoon, as I was repairing a fence post, Margot's car pulled into my driveway again. Slowly this time. Hesitantly. She stepped out with none of the arrogance from her earlier visits. She looked older, softer, as if the fight had drained years from her. I came to apologize, she said cautiously. I set the hammer down. All right. I shouldn't have gone after the land, she said. I was angry. And scared. I nodded, but didn't rescue her with comforting words. Some truths must be spoken without padding. I know you think I'm awful, she whispered. But I wasn't trying to hurt you. Yes, you were, I said gently. But not out of hatred. Out of desperation. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. But I hope someday you'll understand that I was drowning. I do understand, I said. But understanding doesn't make your actions right. She nodded, accepting the boundary. I won't bother you again, she said quietly. I watched her leave, her steps slower than before. And though I didn't feel triumphant, I did feel something else, relief. The truth had settled. The land was safe. My mother's legacy was secure. But the emotional weight of the experience lingered, demanding reflection. And that reflection would become its own final chapter. As I sit on the porch now, watching the late summer light fall across the fields, I think often about what this ordeal taught me. I think about family, how it can wound and heal, shape and distort. How people carry their histories like invisible luggage, burdened by memories they never unpack. I think about Margot, how fear can twist a person into someone unrecognizable. How desperation can make even family believe they are owed what was never theirs. And I think about my mother, how she understood all of this long before I did. How she prepared the land not just as an inheritance, but as a shield. Her decisions protected me. Her foresight saved everything. Justice, I realized, isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's simply about truth rising to the surface. Quietly. Inevitably. When Margot tried to take what wasn't hers, I didn't need cruelty. I didn't need revenge. I only needed clarity, evidence, and courage. Ethical revenge isn't loud. It's steady. It's patient. It's the unwavering pursuit of truth. And in the end, the truth was enough. The land remains whole. The legacy remains intact. And I remain here, walking the ridge at sunrise, tending the soil, honoring what my parents built. If there's a moral to my story, it's this. Document your life. Protect what matters. And when someone tries to take what's yours, let the truth be your strength, not anger. Now I'll leave you with a question, one I hope you'll reflect on. Have you ever had someone try to claim something you'd worked for, or something that wasn't theirs to take? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your thoughts.